When it wants to work. Yay! Hello everyone. Welcome to January's Fic Night, our very first Fic Night of 2021. I'm Victoria Ann. I'm joined tonight by Too Many Curls and Mage Maddie. And tonight we are reading Maddie's story, A Sunsheer Sunset, which is very fitting because it's about fairies, and we have just we're in the middle of a review event all about fairies, so I really like that we're keeping with a theme. Right, so I'm going to jump straight in. The setting sun cast a golden red hue over the trees, the evening calm, as a young fairy rushed her way back to the settlement, cursing all the while. Leaves lifted in the breeze created by her wings as she flew on by with more speed than usual. Violetta weaved in and out of the canopy branches, her wings buzzing. As she did a complicated twisting maneuver around a particularly thorny tree branch, she collided with Strombo, one of her mates, who was also clearly running late to the evening's activities. After disentangling from each other, they flew side by side the remaining 300 yards to the edge of the fairy village, the protective magic shimmering behind them as they passed through the barrier. They alighted upon one of the few remaining perches around the community's gathering place, huffing and puffing from their arduous flights. The gathering place was abuzz with the fluttering of wings and quiet chatter as everyone awaited the arrival of their leader, Oceana Silverwood. "What do you reckon she's going to talk about tonight, Vi?" Strombo asked, fiddling with a loose thread on the hem of his shorts. Violetta slapped his hand away from his clothes, clicking her tongue at him. "Honestly, no wonder you're constantly having to mend these. And at any rate, I'm sure what Queen Silverwood has to say will be very important, regardless of how she says it. You should really treat her with more respect, Strombo. She is your great aunt, after all." Strombo sighed and rolled his eyes, leaning into Violetta. "If I ever speak to her in a formal manner outside of formal duties we share, I swear she's got half a mind to poke me with her dagger just to get me to call her auntie," he chuckled, draping his arm around Violetta's shoulders. "Besides, she'll be forcing you to call her auntie soon enough, once your partnership ceremony is completed with Tansy." "Oh, shove off, that's ages away, so I can thankfully still get away with calling her Your Majesty for a while yet. You're just lucky your sister is so busy with her duties that we get to hang out more instead." He clicked in distaste, waving a hand in dismissal. Strombo opened his mouth to reply, but was cut off by the sound of drums and bells, announcing the arrival of Queen Silverwood to the gathering place. On cue, all fairies present rose from their perches and stood or hovered in the air as their king and queen entered from the far side of the canopy clearing, accompanied by their guard, landing upon the central platform. The king guided his queen up to her throne and took his seat next to her after she'd sat herself. The queen's attendant stepped forward and whispered in her ear for a few seconds before returning to her post at the back of the throne. All noise from the fairies in the audience ceased as the queen rose from her seat and stepped to the front of the platform. Violetta and Strombo fidgeted on their perch. "It is with joy and blessings I bring news of our cousins to the west. King Ciro Wineshine's lands have recovered from the blight upon their crops, and the protective enchantments restored with the help of some of our very best spellcasters from Sunsheer. The autumn equinox festival at the borders between our lands will be taking place in 5 weeks' time to accommodate their repair time," Queen Silverwood announced. Cheers from the crowd were silenced as she raised her arms. "My niece, Lady Redbottle, is managing this event. In the meantime, my people, let us rest and prepare for that which brings us great joy. Fly freely." One last roar from the attendees, and Queen Silverwood returned to her throne. Violetta and Strombo waited for the crush of fairies to dissipate before making their way down to the platform. Their bare feet made no noise as they landed on the moulded wood, inclining their heads respectfully to the queen and then the king. "Oh, come now, enough with the formalities, you two. Give your old uncle a hug," King Novus said cheerfully, opening his arms. Strombo and Violetta laughed and obliged the tight squeezing of his arms around them as his way of showing affection. The queen looked on lovingly at her great-nephew and soon-to-be great-niece-in-law as they were relinquished from her husband's grasp. Violetta straightened her shirt and smiled brightly at the queen. "How is my dear Lady Redbottle getting on with the plans, Your Majesty? She's hardly home enough for me to remember what her wings look like," Violetta said. "Oh, you must stop calling me that in personal settings, dear. It's truly not necessary. Please, call me Aunt Oceana if you must have some sense of formality," Queen Silverwood replied, eyes twinkling. Told you so, Strombo butted in. The king chuckled and took Rylotta's hand. I say, have you and Tansy yet determined the flowers you'll be having at the partnership ceremony? I hear there are some truly divine buttercups grown by the lovely Miss Hawthorne over in the flower district. Oh, I think Tansy was wanting some chrysanthemums, even though she knows how much they make me sneeze. Perhaps you and I could persuade her together on some nice buttercups instead, Rylotta answered. Conversation between them continued as the Queen spoke with her attendant for a moment before returning to her great-nephew. Shall we go home, dear? I'm absolutely famished from that flight this afternoon. One forgets the distance when it's been some months, it appears. The four of them, along with the guard flying some distance behind, took off and flew towards the royal home tree together, laughing and chatting all the while. Fairies bowed their heads or curtsied from their perches and porches as they flew by, or, if they were passing in the opposite direction, gave the party a wide berth and inclined their heads just enough to continue flying without impediment. The Sunshire community, though bound by royal peculiarities, never felt dictatorial in nature, but rather more that of being a large extended family of several thousand members and branches, everyone playing an important and fulfilling role. You'd never know the fairies existed in the woodlands, aside from the odd sound of tinkling bells and drum beats during celebratory occasions and the shimmering of the protective enchantment barrier. The woods in the area were always well tended and flush with fruit, flower, and new growth from its hidden tenants and gardeners, and that was the way it always was and always shall be. Yay! I love it so much, Maddie.
Many questions. It's amazing.
And I especially love that it's just so like lighthearted and whimsy. The side of fairies, like we always kind of get that real dark side of fairies, which I love as well. But this was just such a nice, like autumnal, just beautiful take on fairies that I really enjoy.
You could thank Paula because I wrote this for her Spice of the Archives challenge.
Yes. Was the prompt fairies?
Mm-hmm. She had a list of, so this was Crows Before Bros' challenge, and she had just a list of various different tropes or prompts that she wanted to see more of on the archives, and so one of them was fairies. I was like, I'll try that. I was going to have 2 entries, but I only ended up getting this one in, but I'm happy with this one.
So, okay. How deep is your universe here for this Sunshire community?
As of now, this is it. But since I just reread it, I kind of want to go back to it.
Because
yes, please.
I had questions like, what's the gathering place? What happens there? Why do they call it a partnering ceremony? And like, what is this royal structure and how does it interact with other families? Are there dramas? What are there? So I basically need an entire universe.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, just because it's just this perfect, like, little glimpse into this magical world that, like, exists alongside ours. But it just reads so, like, yeah, this exists. Here's just one moment. Like, I need more. Especially with the, like, partnership ceremony. That would be amazing. I would love to read that. Wink, wink. If you were to write more. Like, where did you start with building this little world?
When I started writing the fic.
I guess that's what easy.
Right. Well, I guess, well, because I got the prompt and said, okay, fairies. And I had, well, at the time, I think it'd been about 6 or 7 months since I had last watched Carnival Row on Prime, which is the very dark take on fairies and that sort of thing. So I was like, all right, that's some cool stuff, but I also don't want to write something super dark for Paula. So I went way opposite. And I was like, oh, what if, and I was like, okay, those fairies are like human size, but what if the fairies are little, like they typically are in fantasy, but they still have their own like entire system of governing. And I think part of it too was drawn from having been in a D&D campaign for over a year at that point. So I was really just kind of pulling from inspo from D&D as well.
Okay. I was going to ask how D&D influenced your ability to write a universe like that. Snap of the finger.
Yeah, I mean, it's helped a lot in terms of being like, okay, I know that I need to have some sort of government system and some sort of like X, Y, and Z parts, because otherwise you can't have, like, when you're in a D&D campaign, your characters can't interact and do anything, then it's no fun. So you have to be able to make sure that there's some sort of background for them to then play in and mess around with. Yeah. So it influences that significantly, I don't think.
Was the other story that you wanted to write set in the same universe?
No, it was supposed to be space station life. It was going to be like an outtake from my sci-fi screenplay or something.
Oh, yeah.
No, but I could see you having a brilliant setting for literally anything. Because obviously you make me believe that an entire world exists in 1,106 words.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, well, right now too, I just started, I'm the Dungeon Master for the D&D campaign that I'm running with some of the other FFT folks, and that's also been a lesson in world building and figuring out, like, okay, here's kind of the overarching things that are going on, but also needing to make sure I can focus in on the regional and then also within the cities, city stuff, so that they can play and interact and fight.
Do you think it gets easier the more sort of worlds that you build?
I think so. I think it's easier to get the basics in and kind of figured out, and it just takes longer than to get your details situated. But I think it's true for any kind of like writing skills. Like once you have done different versions of it after a while, it's easier to get that first bit done, and then it becomes easier after that to get the details in.
Okay. Do you have other authors that you like to read for like really good and well done world building?
I really, really love, I mean, it's an oldie but a goodie. Tamora Pierce's Turtle series. Like that whole it's a universe of books, because there's like, I don't know, 20 books or something.
Oh wow.
Yeah. There's a bunch of different quartets, trilogies, all that. And they all work together, even though the first book in that series was written in the 80s, and the most recent one was published in like 2018. Like, and they all interconnect. There's no huge holes. It all fits together perfectly, which is amazing to me.
Are they like a linear release, or in terms of timeline?
Ish. Okay, some of them, like there's an order in which you're supposed to read them, so they're kind of linear in terms of when they release, but also not. Like my favorite trilogy is actually meant to take place like a few hundred years before most of the series takes place.
Okay.
Yeah. Another person,
I love universes like that.
Another series I like that's sci-fi versus fantasy is by Becky Chambers. It's the Wayfarers series, which is all about sci-fi stuff. And each book is its own piece, but they connect, and they have this really cool set of world building of like, here's all these different species and all these planets that they live on, and here's how AI works in this time, and it's all done very, very well.
I've really been wanting to read her books. I see them on the shelves in bookshops all the time. And since sci-fi is a fairly recent genre that I've been really loving, she's definitely on my list. I know you have all the sci-fi recommendations. So I just like to ask everyone who jumps on, what are you currently working on?
Well, reviews.
We'll count those.
But otherwise, I've got 3 challenge entries that are due in February that I have not started, but I should be.
Plenty of time.
It's fine. I think I'll get it done. I just need to. I think I'm going to start working on it either. I'll start it tomorrow night, because tonight I have to do D&D writing. So otherwise, other than challenge entries, though, I think I'm going to start my draft 2 of my screenplay.
Oh, how exciting. Are you like starting from the beginning and working through it again?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think this time I'm going to start with an outline and more vigorously go through it. Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Outlines now. Oh, that's so exciting. And I, for one, am always excited for more of your stories, because they're always so unique and just so much fun. And
thank you.
Thank you for writing them.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. The story It's short and excellent and left me feeling like it was a trailer for like an amazing new
Yeah.
series to read. So
Oh my god! If anything of my fantasy work ever got made into like a show or something, I think I would die of happiness.
So would I. Of yours. I'd be so excited.
I was hype. I know her.
Yeah, exactly. Don't forget us, Manny.
Never.
Just before we go, Melanie and Laura have jumped on. Melanie just says, "Yay, Manny!" and they're both really excited for your screenplay.
Oh, let's go.
All right. There's nothing else. We'll sign off here. Thank you so much, Maddie, for joining us and letting us read your magical story. And thanks, Melanie and Laura, and anyone else who is watching tonight. And we will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.